What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And it's Wednesday, February 1st, 2017. 2 weeks to Valentine's Day. For those of you with significant others, better start making your carefully crafted plans here right now. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. There's a lot going on. And our phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And if I sound a little flustered, it's because a lot of stuff is coming in all at once here, and we got a lot of stuff to talk about here. Parliament had their vote on the Brexit, and they backed Brexit in a landslide vote. They finally basically said, we can't ignore what the British people want. So Title 50 is about to be triggered. Everybody thought that forcing it into Parliament was going to result in Remain finally winning. It did not happen at all. So that's kind of amazing. Also breaking right now, Senator Sessions has been confirmed for Attorney General. And it was thought there was going to be a huge fight there because under the current rules, it takes 60 votes in the Senate to confirm a Supreme Court judge. And the GOP only had 54. But apparently enough of the Democrats went along with this, and Sessions is now the Attorney General, and a lot of people are going to be sweating because with Sessions as Attorney General, Comey as FBI Director, and Trump as President, they're going to start going after a lot of these people who need to be thrown in jail as a warning to future politicians. This kind of behavior will not be tolerated. And apparently Donald Trump has given Chavez an absolute green light. Whatever you want to investigate, go for it. So this is really getting intense here. Now, as was expected last night, Trump nominated Neil Gorsuch for the Supreme Court vacancy. And he's seen as a Scalia clone. And it's kind of amazing because the Atlanta Black Star's Kamau Franklin says that if he's confirmed, Gorsuch will mirror Scalia's reactionary rulings in effect and so forth and so on. When did being a strict constitutionalist make one reactionary? And I realized I misspoke there. The confirmation for the Supreme Court justice hasn't happened, but Sessions has been confirmed here. So I'm going to take a deep breath and calm on down here. Basically, Gorsuch is actually well-liked and well-respected. He's a favorite of conservatives and libertarians, but a lot of liberals liked him as well. And, of course, a lot of the liberals don't like the fact that he's headed for the Supreme Court. Apparently, according to this article out of Information Liberation, they're already demonizing Neil Gorsuch and saying he shouldn't be on the Supreme Court because he's a white male. Ooh, those white males, we can't have them in any kind of power anymore. They'll bring back slavery. They'll bring back whatever it is they're thinking about. Okay, let's see. I mean, the media is going to uncork on this guy. You know, he tap dances barefoot on shag carpeting. When he visits blind people, he rearranges the furniture. He likes to kick puppy dogs and put the puppy dog up on top of Mitt Romney's car and all the rest of that stuff. Let's take a quick phone call. Bob in Las Vegas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I also heard that Gorsuch passes gas in elevators.
Ah, so, yeah, that one. Well, that's it. That's he's toast. He's toast right now.
You know, Mike, it was an interesting day at the White House. They had that the first day at the press briefing of those Skype questions.
Yes.
So I think that's a great idea, and hopefully they'll have Mike Rivero on one of those Skype screens.
Well, they're highly coveted, and you know, not everybody's getting on in. And to be very honest, there's an application process you have to go through. So we'll be dealing with all of that kind of stuff later.
I wanted to ask you, based on the 9/11 narrative that we were told, of 15 of the 19 hijackers were from Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
We know that Saudi Arabia is an incubator of terrorism based on its educational system, its hate-mongering Salafist clerics. Why, in your opinion, why was Saudi Arabia not on that terror list?
I think that may have been part of the quid pro quo by which Saudi Arabia has agreed to set up safe zones for Syrian refugees so that they're not pouring into Europe and the United States.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, that's all I had. Thank you, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Now, of course, as soon as Neil Gorsuch was announced, there was an immediate protest outside the Supreme Court, protesting against Trump, protesting against the immigration ban against those countries, and they had ready-made signs. Everybody noticed it. They had professionally printed signs with his name all ready to go. Paul Joseph Watson tweeted out, "It's almost like they're being controlled by an organized network funded by a billionaire globalist." Gee, you think? Now, of course, everybody's screaming about Trump's immigration measures. And Trump, I think, has just reached the point of being totally fed up with the corporate media. And at this point, he's not even going to get engaged with it anymore. He says, you can call it whatever you want. I don't care if you call it a ban. I don't care what you call it, because it is what it is, and we're going to keep the bad people out. And that's really what it is. And it seems like he's reached his breaking point with the corporate media. We're going to take a quick moment to shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And basically, I mean, the rhetoric is just getting out of control. Tim Kaine, who lost out to Hillary Clinton and lost the White House and everything, came out saying that he believes the administration of Donald Trump is filled with Holocaust deniers, and then compared Trump's executive orders on immigration to a latter-day Holocaust. I mean, that's a bit of a stretch. That is really, really a bit of a stretch. And I'm wondering why he's dragging up the Holocaust and all the rest of that nonsense here. Now, interesting article came out of Investment Watch blog, because, and the corporate media isn't reporting this, there are Muslims coming into the United States of America this very day from countries other than those that are on the executive order. And there's a gentleman who's out there saying, I just arrived at Los Angeles International. Nobody asked me about religion, even though the passport has a Muslim name clearly stated. It's not a ban on Muslims. It's a ban on travel from certain countries that do not like us, that are known to be sponsors of terror. And as Priebus was saying, there could be more countries added to it at some point. Now, Iran is on that list of countries facing this temporary immigration ban. Tehran has responded by threatening to drop the U.S. dollar for all international trade. Now, that is a real threat to the United States, as opposed to all this mythical nuclear weapons kind of nonsense. But that is a serious, serious issue. And it does feel like the whole world is still building toward a crisis point here. Now, over in Germany, Martin Schulz, he's the social democrat who's running against Angela Merkel in September's election. And he might just win because Merkel's self-destructing. And he basically came on out and said, Donald Trump has not acted like an American since becoming U.S. president. What Trump is doing is un-American. The United States stand, like few other countries, for enlightenment, democracy, and the values of freedom. Well, apparently, Martin Schulz does not include the freedom to decide who does or does not get to come into this country among those values of freedom. And every country has that right. Just because Germany has surrendered that right and opened their borders does not obligate anybody else to go along with that. Now, there was a bit of an embarrassment at that protest outside the Supreme Court last night, actually Monday night, because House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer were out there rallying the Democrats and, you know, screaming about Donald Trump and this immigration. And they came to the point in the program where supposedly real people were going to be interviewed to share their stories. And Pelosi was caught on a hot mic telling Schumer, introduce the real people. I'll do the real people now. And Schumer saying, where are they? And making it very obvious they had a bunch of actors all set up to do their little crying jag and about, you know, how terrible it was if they couldn't stay in the United States. And somebody missed a cue because they weren't there on time. By the way, Amy Schumer is out there defending her political relative, Chuck, by saying, oh, come on, he can't act. He can't cry on demand. Now, do you remember Mike Hager? This was the Iraqi. It was all over the corporate media. Claimed his mother died because of the Muslim ban. And as it turned out, it's been confirmed by a local imam that she actually died several days before the executive order was even announced. It's almost like truth and reality just don't even factor into the liberal mindset anymore. Now, everyone's talking about Starbucks and their promise to hire 10,000 refugees and displacing workers in their stores. Now, Starbucks is a global operation, but if they do that here in the United States of America, if they choose a refugee over an American simply because that person is a refugee, it is a violation of the Equal Employment Act, which forbids discrimination on national origin. And that was originally written to say you can't discriminate against employees because they come from a foreign country, but it also means you can't discriminate against a potential employee because they come from this country. And what's really amazing are how many of these liberals are out there openly flaunting the laws of the United States of America. And they're still screaming it's all about racism, it's all about hate, it's all about intolerance. No, it isn't. It's about security. And it's not an attack on one religion. If you live in any of those countries on that list, you are going to have problems coming to the United States of America, whether you are a Muslim, a Jew, a Christian, an atheist, a Pastafarian, a Zoroastrian, a Scientologist. It's not directed at a religion. It's directed at certain nations. And it does go back to that law that's 65 years old. By the way, I did make a slight mistake on that. Apparently Harry Truman tried to veto that law, and he was overridden by Congress. One of our sharp listeners wrote in and corrected me on that one here. Now, for a long time, Judicial Watch has been expressing concern about that open southern border as a vector for terrorist attacks, that Islamic terrorists are and have been operating in Mexican border towns and coming across the United States to carry out surveillance ahead of potential attacks. Now, in a report issued this month by the Texas Department of Public Safety, the agency is saying there is an elevated terrorism threat to the United States coming from Mexico. There's another reason to close that border, especially with the Super Bowl coming up this weekend. Now, somebody got this wonderful little video. CNN, his Jake Tapper, was interviewing Nancy Pelosi about this illegal immigrant issue, and we should just let them in, make them citizens. And one of the people in the audience stood up to ask a question and basically told a horror story how her son had been tortured, tied up like an animal, and set on fire by an illegal immigrant back in 2010. And this is something that's been happening a lot. And it never gets any coverage in the corporate media. And Pelosi is out there saying, oh, well, we all feel sorry for what happened to your son here, and it's a terrible thing, but really, you know, they're not all like that. And that's accurate. But there are enough of them like that where we ought to be a little bit more careful. And just talk to these people who want... There is a legal immigration process that anybody can follow to become a citizen of the United States of America, and along the way they have to prove they're going to be loyal American citizens, loyal to the Constitution, that they're going to integrate, that they're not carrying contagious diseases, that they're not dangerous fanatics. This idea of open borders is like taking all the locks off of your doors in your home and then just saying, well, look, all the people outside aren't burglars. I mean, that's what they're pushing out there. Now, there's an article out here in Zero Hedge, The Fix-Nothing Farce of Symbolic Politics, and they're making the same point that I did. The wall is more of a symbol than anything else, because as long as we have the welfare magnet going on, walls won't do anything. They'll be tunneled under, they'll be overflown, they'll be bypassed by sea. It really isn't effective until you remove that financial inducement that draws people here. And Trump was talking about a wall, I'm sure, because that was an image that played very well during the campaign. But we're now getting indications that Donald Trump has been paying attention to what Ron Paul's been saying about the welfare magnet, because apparently an executive order is being prepared that will say you cannot give illegal immigrants any kind of welfare. It's actually already a violation of U.S. law. Title 8 It is illegal to harbor, support, transport, or hire non-citizens. And, of course, Mexico is still out there threatening to unleash the drug cartels on America in retaliation, another reason to build the wall, or shut it down, close it down. And amazingly enough, up at New York University, there's a professor there who used to be Mexico's Secretary of Foreign Affairs, Jorge Castaneda, says, yeah, it's a good idea. Mexico should just flood the United States with all these illegal drugs to punish the United States for refusing to allow Mexicans to come live here. Now, the Texas governor is declaring an emergency in order to ban sanctuary cities within Texas. He's taking the opposite position from California's Governor Jerry Brown, which is going to turn the whole state into a sanctuary. Up in Oregon, Governor Kate Brown is creating what she calls the Trump-resistant team. These people are not going to be happy until they start a civil war here. And here's where it gets really, really bizarre. The Los Angeles Times came out with an article that says having a border wall is a bad thing because it will make America better and Mexico worse. What's wrong with wanting America to be better? What's wrong with America taking care of America? And the LA Times is just betraying the fact that they are in league with the globalists here. Now then, up in Portland, Oregon, we were hearing a little bit of rumbling about this earlier. Micah Rhodes was this leader of the anti-Trump protest in Portland. He has now been arrested for sexual contact with a teenage boy and a girl. We don't know the age of the girl. And he's facing 4 counts of second-degree sexual abuse. And apparently he's a registered sex offender. He's had these problems before. And this is the best they can come up with to represent the opposition to Donald Trump? It's amazing here. California State Senator Nancy Skinner of Berkeley, standing alongside Senate Pro Tem Kevin DeLeon and Assembly Speaker Anthony Rendon, are now calling for Melania Trump to be deported, to show what Donald Trump, what it feels like when illegals are deported. I mean, they are getting extraordinarily petty on all of this stuff. Now, the Democrats have been stalling on confirmation votes for Price and Mnuchin. Now, they were stalling on Sessions. They've apparently caved on him. He's now the new Attorney General, and maybe they'll get with the program. But the much ballyhooed Democratic stall doesn't seem to be all that it was advertised or proclaimed to be here. As I mentioned at the top of the show, President Trump has told Congressman Chavez, you're doing a great job. Anywhere you want to investigate, just go ahead and do it. And that's going to have a lot of people in the narcocracy sweating. Now, there's an interesting little article that came out of Investment Watch blog. The New American Coup, Media Leading Charge to Topple the Government. And the subheaded is, there's clearly a coup unfolding by the Democrats and the media. It's obvious to everybody. And I think it's typified by this video commentary published by the London Guardian. And it features Nesreen Malik, who's a journalist for The Guardian, basically saying physical attacks on Donald Trump supporters should not be condemned because everybody who supports Donald Trump is a bigot. It's an incitement to violence. And by the way, advocating the overthrow of the government because Hillary didn't get elected is also a crime. Title 18, Section 2385. Whoever knowingly or willfully advocates, abets, advises, or teaches the duty, necessity, desirability of bringing down the government, you can go to jail. You can go to jail. You look at the behavior of all these liberal crybabies, and they fit the legal definitions of domestic terrorism. Title 18, Section 2331. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I must have said something that bothered somebody because the children are back pounding on my server. And I got an email that apparently the BAM user feed is being DOS'd as well. So we'll just have to see what's going on with all of that nonsense out there. Anyway, Donald Trump, speaking at a meeting honoring Black History Month on Wednesday, earlier today, said he doesn't watch CNN because he doesn't like watching fake news. And it's more than just a passing comment, because apparently the White House has now blackballed CNN. No White House representatives are allowed to be interviewed on CNN. They're forbidden to be interviewed by CNN. He's cutting them off completely. Now, as I mentioned before, this weekend is the Super Bowl, and the Houston police are a little bit nervous about what's going on. They are complaining that they should have had more warning on the immigration ban, because being as close to the Mexican border as they are, they see themselves as vulnerable. And keeping a Super Bowl safe is a major task any year. It's going to be all the worse this year. And it is a highly symbolic target. We've talked about Super Bowl being fodder for a false flag of some kind. It still could happen. So let's turn to the war zones, emphasis on the plural. Government forces have cleaned out another pocket of ISIS al-Qaeda near Damascus. And along the way, kind of an interesting little interview surfaced. The Flemish father, Daniel Mayes, 78 years old, lives in Syria in Mar Yaqub Monastery. This is 6th century monastery. And basically, he's been a witness to this war. And he's out there saying Western reports on what's going on in Syria are very misleading. He says the Americans and their allies want to completely ruin the country, and Putin and Assad saved my life. So that's coming from the ground. Now, let's go ahead and take a phone call. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Yeah, on the protesters, you know, we said this before, they're all cultists. You can't reason with these people. It's like the Terminator. Whatever you say to them, it doesn't matter. They believe what they believe, like Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi.
The true believers.
They're the true believers. And you mentioned, like, you know, Trump's going to keep the extremists out. Well, these people are extremists, Mike.
Well, it looks...
You'll smash a brick in back of your head, Mike, and laugh, and all the people around them won't do a thing to help you. They're dangerous.
Yes, I agree. I absolutely agree with that. They are fanatics, and they think the rules should not apply to them. And it is a serious, serious problem. But again, it's like, again, watching that Lee Remini series on the Church of Scientology. These people are perfectly happy behaving the way they do because they believe it serves a larger, more noble purpose, that no matter what they do today, it will ultimately result in a better world for everybody. They're seriously, seriously deluded.
They are. They're sociopaths. If you look at the guy from Germany you mentioned, and the guy from Brussels, who, if you saw that with Nigel Farage, the guy from Brussels, I forgot his name, you know, he's a neoliberal globalist, has that, you know, we are the world. They basically want to control the world through Marxism. That's you know, globalist Marx. That's what it's about. And they fear Nigel Farage, the Brexit, Trump, the movement in Germany, and so on and so forth. You know. Hey, Mike, on Nancy Pelosi, did you mention when she had that talk with the girl from Yemen about her mother being stuck in Yemen? I'm like, but what about the bombing by the Saudis that we funded with weapons? Hillary Clinton, France, Germany, Britain, Canada. It's the same group, and she totally ignored that. You know, she didn't even.
I'll give you another example. Remember Elian Gonzalez? When Bill Clinton was in office, they sent in armed troops to grab this kid and deport him, and the Democrats cheered. That's how hypocritical they are being. Dustin, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And I forgot to mention at the top of the program here that Don Wiskin of Extendivite will be our third-hour guest talking about his product. Now, something very odd is happening over in Yemen. And as you know, Donald Trump went ahead and had an attack on al-Qaeda in Yemen. And it went disastrously wrong. A SEAL Team 6 member was killed along with an 8-year-old American girl. Not even sure why she was there. But everything went wrong. And it's now coming on out that apparently Al-Qaeda knew the attack was coming. They were prepared. They were expecting it. The Americans walked basically into a trap. And so now the question is, did somebody leak this raid to Al-Qaeda in Yemen? And before you say, oh, pish and tosh, that could never happen, yeah, it can happen, and it has happened before. Because if you'll remember when Francis Gary Powers, U-2, was shot down over the Soviet Union, and it threw a major roadblock up in Kennedy and Khrushchev's plan to try and ratchet down tension, which was a threat to the military-industrial complex in the United States and the equivalent body in the former Soviet Union. And it later came on out that Francis Gary Powers had to reduce his altitude. Something had gone wrong with his aircraft where it flamed out. And because it was a high-altitude aircraft, he couldn't do a restart at altitude. He had to come on down where the air was denser, windmill the engine, and then restart it. And when he was down in the lower altitude is when he got shot down. Then there was Jimmy Carter, who staged a rescue for the Iranian hostages, which went wrong when the helicopters broke down in the desert. And sabotage was suspected there as well. So Donald Trump is going to have to really focus on cleaning his house of people who are not on board with him, because his opposition has already demonstrated a willingness to do anything to keep their own agendas going, regardless of the president, regardless of the will of the American people. Now, this gets us back to the fact that there's this preemptive attack Iran bill that's going through the House of Representatives, which would pre-authorize President Trump to carry out an unprovoked attack on Iran on the flimsy excuse that we have to prevent Iran from getting nuclear weapons. And remember, for all the screaming about Iran's nuclear weapons, and for that matter, Iraq's nuclear weapons, there's been no proof whatsoever. The only proof was the so-called laptop of death, which was claimed to have been stolen from an Iranian nuclear scientist and had all kinds of charts and graphs of nuclear weapons. And real experts in nuclear weapons looked at it and said, it's a movie prop. The diagrams are copied off the internet. They've been misused, mislabeled. Nothing that's in there would actually work. It was a prop. And the laptop was supposedly provided by MEK, which was being used as a propaganda laundry, a deception laundry, most likely by Israel. So I would be very cautious about a new war with Iran. First of all, it's not going to look good in the eyes of the world. Iran has not initiated a war of aggression against another country in over 200 years. It's not in their nature. They just want to be left alone. But there's something else you need to remember. Both Moscow and Beijing have stated an attack on Tehran is an attack on us. It's sort of an updated Monroe Doctrine in reverse. Or Kennedy Doctrine, rather, in reverse. So we want to be very, very careful about this. Now, we've been reporting on the increased attacks by Ukraine against the breakaway republics, and it's being noticed by other people. Over in southfront.org, they're talking about how there's been this intense escalation in eastern Ukraine in the last days of January, with heavy shelling. And over at facti.org, they have an article in which the Deputy Defense Minister of Ukraine admitted that Ukraine's military is attacking the Donetsk Republic. Now, that embarrassing revelation resulted in Kiev trying to claim that Russia shot at a Ukrainian transport plane over the Black Sea. Russia's denying it. This is Kiev trying to change the story and change the focus. It's not really working because the UN Security Council just called for Kiev to return immediately to the ceasefire that's supposed to be in place. And I hope Donald Trump is paying attention to all these war hawks who want to start a war and stick him with it, because they are still there and they're still active. Now, Berlin is pointing the finger of blame at Kiev for the deteriorating situation in the Donbass. And Kiev may have just made a major oopsie, because apparently on January 31st, the tail section of a Buk missile launched by the Ukrainian army from the outskirts of Avdiivka fell in the residential area of the city. Why is this important? Because remember when Malaysian Airlines Flight 17 was shot down, the main propaganda point was it had to be the breakaway republics that were doing it because Ukraine doesn't have the Buk missile. Wrong. So, right now, according to RIMF.com and the military in general, the center of gravity for U.S. operations in Europe is now in Zagan, where the U.S. and Polish troops are holding their joint drills. This is the biggest U.S. deployment in Europe since the end of the Cold War. And they're trying to bring that Cold War back because it's such a wonderful scam. Oh, we've got enemies. We've got to take money away from the American people and build bombs and planes and shiny things and things that you can't see. And we don't have to actually make sure that they work because, in theory, they're never actually going to be used. It was a giant scam. And the U.S. military-industrial complex was doing it, and so was the equivalent body over in the former Soviet Union. And they're trying to restart it because they want your money. Now, Trump's advisor, Steve Bannon, thinks that there will be war with China in the next few years. And part of that is based on the fact that China has just tested a new missile that holds 10 MIRV warheads. Now, it's a little bit smaller than the U.S. Trident, which can hold 12, but is limited by treaty to 8, plus 4 decoys. Everybody's gearing up for a major war. And, of course, that makes Claire and I very nervous because we live on Oahu, and we've got a first-strike nuclear target right outside that window there. So we'd kind of like to see this thing kind of calm down. Now, over in France, there's a corruption investigation going on. They're looking into presidential candidate Francois Fillon, claiming he misused public money. And the police interviewed Fillon and his wife, and apparently the issue is that she supposedly had a job paid for by the taxpayers that amounted to €500,000 and lasted 8 years. And apparently she didn't actually do anything. It was just a made-up job in order to justify handing her public money. And police have now raided Parliament in Fillon, looking for evidence. Now, they must have found something. They're hot on the trail here. Okay, a YouTube video we put on up. Israel plans to stir Trump into war with Iran and expand the illegal settlements. And we need to keep an eye on Israel, because if you will remember Israel's role in pushing for that U.S. invasion of Iraq, don't forget that it was Israel that flew into Iraq and bombed their civilian power station at Osirak, claiming there was a bomb factory underneath, like Israel has underneath Dimona. And then following the 2003 invasion, international experts examined the ruins of Osirak, and all they found was a power station. And also remember when Israel attacked the USS Liberty and tried to claim Egypt was doing it, that was another time when Israel was trying to create a war for the U.S. to fight. It's what they do. Now, Philip Giraldi is out there saying that there's an article everybody ought to be looking at right now. And it's this story that came out of England a couple of weeks ago about how the Israeli embassy in London connived with government officials to take down parliamentarians and ministers who were considered to be too critical of Israel. And it was also discovered that the Israeli embassy was secretly subsidizing and advising private groups promoting Israeli interests, including associations of members of parliaments. And Philip Giraldi is saying, why is the corporate media not looking at this given the recent furor over the still unfounded allegations of Russia interfering in American politics? Well, I've been asking that same question as well. Israel's always interfering with our politics. Why is that okay, and why is Russia the big deal? Now, Israel's under a lot of criticism for some of their settlement building, grabbing more land, and so, of course, what are they going to do? They're going to play for sympathy. They're going to play for sympathy, and apparently for the third time in a month, 17 Jewish community centers across the U.S. were evacuated after receiving simultaneous bomb threats. No bombs were found, of course. This is more of the usual, feel sorry for us and don't ask questions about Palestine, the USS Liberty, or the Holocaust hoax. They've gone to that well too many times. Nobody believes that anymore. Now, we were talking about the poor quality of American weapons and the inadvisability of going up against Russia and China with our current junk hardware. And apparently there's been another goof over in Tokyo Harbor. The Ticonderoga-class guided missile cruiser USS Antietam ran aground, destroyed its propellers, and ripped a hole in its hull, spilling thousands of gallons of oil into the harbor. The ship is unable to move on its own, had to be brought back to the dock by tugboats. And it happens all the time. Back in 2009, we actually had another Ticonderoga-class cruiser that ran aground on the reef right outside the entrance to Pearl Harbor. I guess they missed the navigation beacon, and we could actually just look out the window and see it. And the only way they were finally able to float it free is they had to dump the storage tanks for the ship's heads, the bathrooms. In other words, they literally dumped hundreds of gallons of raw sewage onto a protected environmental reef before they could get the ship off. So, and of course, I was living here when the USS Greenville rammed and sunk that Japanese training boat for fishing, for fishermen. It was a fishing boat that was devoted to teaching Japanese students how to be fishermen for the commercial fishing fleet. And the Greenville rammed that, sank it. That was a horrible disaster. All right, let's talk about the economic news here a little bit. Donald Trump is getting ready to roll back financial regulations passed after the 2008 crisis, primarily the Dodd-Frank, which actually made things a lot worse because Dodd-Frank was mostly about protecting Wall Street at the expense of the American people. But I really think that Trump should go back a little bit further and repeal that, what they laughingly call the Citigroup Relief Act, which overturned Glass-Steagall. We need to bring Glass-Steagall back. Now, for those who don't understand what that's all about, following the Depression of the 1930s, it was realized that one of the contributing factors had been the fact that investment banks and depositor banks were often owned by the same company. And investment banks were making high-risk investments using depositor money. And that's where a lot of the harm came from. So Glass-Steagall said, if you are a depositor bank and you are dealing with money from your savings and checking account customers, you must be very cautious. You can only invest in quality, low-risk investments. If you're a private investment bank and it's your own money you're playing with, then the sky's the limit. Well, what really set us all up for the mess in 2008 was they passed a bill to repeal Glass-Steagall. And that was sort of forced by the fact that Travelers and Citicorp rather, had merged together, which was a violation of Glass-Steagall. So rather than enforce the law, they repealed the law, and all of a sudden Wall Street started going crazy with financial institutions that were depositor banks starting to invest in high-risk investments like investment banks would. And that's where it all started falling apart. We do need to bring Glass-Steagall back. Now, I know Donald Trump is against regulation, and there are too many gratuitous and pointless regulations, but we do need to have a leash on Wall Street. And we do need to put some of those crooked bankers in prison. Now, over in Europe, the bond market is in serious trouble. They've got the worst January on record ever, and it's a signal of the political panic that's spreading across the European Union from all these upcoming elections in places like France, Germany, and the Netherlands, where the polls are showing that anti-EU sovereigntist nationalists are likely to win. And so their bond market is in a bit of a turmoil. Now, starting on March 1st, a month from now, thousands of financial institutions are going to be subject to new rules that require them to exchange variation margins on their non-cleared derivatives trades. I know it sounds fluffy, but it's a way of trying to bring some more transparency to the derivatives market. Now, at this point, it looks like a lot of these companies are not going to be able to meet that deadline, which means they'll be temporarily unable to access the derivatives market, and nobody's entirely sure what damage that might cause. Behind it all, though, is the big, ugly, black monster, which is the accumulated government and total debt of the nation. And again, you need to go back and look at that 11th marble. Private central banking is a system which, by design, creates more debt than money with which to pay that debt until the debt overwhelms the system. Donald Trump wants to do a lot of things. He wants to mount his infrastructure program. He doesn't have the money to do it with. And I think here might be an opportunity for Donald Trump to do what John F. Kennedy did, even though it will anger the private central bankers and they'll take a shot at him. And that is for Donald Trump to issue a new U.S. currency to fund the infrastructure program interest-free. And as Ellen Brown was correctly pointing it out, if Trump does that, it'll cut half the cost of that infrastructure program right off. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to start taking some phone calls. Francis in Vancouver, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Francis, are you there?
Hi, Mike. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Are you trying to sell me a condo?
Can you hear me?
Are you trying to sell me a condo?
Okay, good. Yeah. No.
You're on the air. Start talking. You're on the air.
Okay, I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about VoltaireNet.org, Thierry Meyssan.
Yes.
And Thierry Meyssan is arguably the first 9/11 truther. And he, you know what? There's a huge delay here. Just let me check here. I'm going to hang up.
All right, we're going to switch over to Tom in Texas. Aloha, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Howdy, Michael.
Howdy.
You're a satirical run for a presidency.
Yes.
Do you still have any of the campaign buttons?
Yeah, I think I do. Yeah. In fact, yes, I do. And the Cafe Press store is still active, even though I don't have a link to it.
Well, no, that's fine. But if I send you a gift, I really love the button. I want to wear it on my suspenders of the one that he couldn't do any worse.
Well, yeah, that was my campaign motto. Rivero 2016, he could hardly do any worse. If you send me something with your return address, and I'll send you a button, okay?
Okay, I'm going to send you a $1 million bill with President Trump's picture on it.
Okay.
I'm serious.
Oh, no, I know they're out there. I know they're out there. I've got the $10 million bill with Obama's face on there. I've even got a $10 million bill with my face on it. It's all funny money.
Hey, are you going to cut me off? You want to talk some more?
Well, we've got about 2 minutes before the station identification, so what's on your mind?
No, what? I'm going to send you something, and I want you to take Miss Claire out for a nice dinner for me. Okay?
Oh, well, I appreciate that very much, and we certainly will.
I want my button.
I will get you your button. Just make sure I get your address, and I'll get you your button.
You got it coming.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you.
Brother.
Aloha. Okay. All righty. Getting on back to the economic news here. Private payrolls grew by 246,000 in January, which was way above the estimated growth of 165,000. So it already looks like our economy, at least in the grassroots level, is starting to wake up and take notice of the Trump presidency. Of course, the real problem remains the crushing debt, the derivatives exposure on Wall Street. We're all basically hostage to those few big buildings in New York. If they mess up, we all suffer for it. because the poor are always made to pay for the mistakes of the rich. That's a truism throughout all of history. Now, Transportation Secretary Elaine Chao is saying that the Highway Trust Fund is going to be bankrupt by 2021 without a new source of revenue. Gas tax is no longer adequate. Well, there's a good reason for that, and I'll mention it when we come back from station identification. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And before we went to station identification, I was talking about newly confirmed Transportation Secretary Elaine Chao is saying the Highway Trust Fund is going to go bankrupt by 2021 unless there's a new source of revenue because gas tax is no longer adequate. There are two aspects to that statement. First of all, as our economy has been in the doldrums, people simply aren't driving as much as they used to. They're not going to work. They don't have money to go on gratuitous trips for fun. In some cases, we're driving much older cars, and we drive them as little as possible in order to stretch them out, make them last as long as possible. The other aspect, of course, has been the introduction of electric vehicles that do not pay gas tax because they do not buy gasoline. Some states are already talking about taxing electric cars by the mile to make up for those lost revenues. But all in all, it's part of this ongoing pattern that government will take as much money away from you as they think they can get away with, even if they have to make up a total nonsense reason for doing it, like human-caused global warming. Fitbit is going to lay off 110 employees. Apparently, the wearables market is not doing as well as expected, and it's already warning investors its fourth quarter earnings from last year are not going to be all that good. And part of it is I think wearables were a fad, and it wasn't going to last. I know that the Apple iWatch looks cool and fun, but it's basically yet another device to maintain and keep charged, keep track of, along with your cell phone. If it's on your cell phone, why do you need it on your wrist? And, of course, Apple also overpriced it. And they tried to make it a fashion statement. The high-end model had gold. It was a piece of jewelry with high-tech in it, and it did not do very well either. And people just don't have the money to buy things they don't see as absolutely essential to their life. And that's a reality that is going to remain until we return to a system in which ordinary working Americans can trade their labor for decent wages and salaries with which to go shopping and buy this stuff. And I don't understand why our economic planners don't see this. Now, over in Europe, the International Monetary Fund has come out with a new report into the single currency, and basically says the Eurozone is running excessive deficits, distorted budgets, poor compliance with the fiscal rules, and basically saying at this point it's dysfunctional. The euro has become dysfunctional. Now, when the IMF is saying excessive deficits, what they're thinking of is you got to make your people live more cheaply so you can give the bankers more money, because that's always going to be the message from these large central banks. You must make do with less so we can have more. But it really has reached a point where they can't make it work anymore. Greece can't make it work under the unrealistic demands and expectations of the European Central Bank and the IMF and the World Bank. Cyprus certainly can't. It is a doomed system. Now, getting on back to the political scene all across Europe, we are beginning to see more and more countries get onto this idea of stop Operation Soros, because now everybody is picking up on who the author of all this push for globalism and refugee nonsense has been, and it's George Soros, who's spending his billions and billions of dollars to bring about a single global government, a new world order, and it's been his lifelong dream. And it was so close to him he could taste it. If Hillary had stolen that election, they'd be just within inches of that single golden throne for all of planet Earth. But more and more nations are starting to slam him down and ban his non-governmental organizations and say, get out. We don't need what it is you claim to be doing in our country because you're not doing it, you're doing something else. Now, apparently over in Paris, there's a new problem where gangs of North African migrants are starting to target Chinese migrants with the justification that the Chinese are too rich. And apparently there have been knife attacks, more than 200 attacks on the Chinese immigrants from these hostile migrant gangs. It really is spiraling out of control. Up in Finland, they've been trying to get a handle on just what the refugee migrant crisis is up there, and they're discovering that 2/3 of the asylum seekers who claim to be children are in fact adults. And they're posing as children because they figure under Finnish law and the EU law, they have a better chance of being granted asylum. But they're not actually children. They're fully functioning adults. Now, Nigel Farage is calling for an immigrant ban in Britain even stronger than the one Donald Trump just put in place here in the United States. This is an idea that's taking off, and polls are continuing to show the American people are, for the most part, on board with this. They've been watching our country dissolving under this onslaught of illegal immigrants and refugees being poured into our streets, and we want our country back. We want America for Americans. And again, I am not saying anything bad about legal immigrants. Because if you come here to the United States of America through the legal immigration procedure, welcome. Make yourself at home. I hope you are not disappointed by what you find here. But we're talking about illegal immigrants, and it's not racism because illegal is not a race. Now, getting on back to George Soros, we're now finding out that John McCain, Paul Ryan, and Marco Rubio were all receiving generous backing from Soros during the 2016 campaign. And apparently John McCain has been supported by Soros going back to at least 2001. And Soros has, in my mind, become the greatest argument in favor of socialism by demonstrating to the world what individuals with way too much money are capable of doing. Because George Soros seems to feel, along with Bill Gates, that having billions of dollars gives them the right to play with all of our lives, like we're their personal toys. And we're not. And neither George Soros nor Bill Gates are an elected leader of any democratic country. Now, the PC people are still out there. Over in Ohio, there's been a big stink in Youngstown, Ohio, at the Cardinal Mooney High School, when an African-American history class basically took a field trip to go on out and pick cotton and listen to black spiritual music from the pre-Civil War area so that they could understand slavery. And, of course, everybody just flipped out at that, especially the parents of these kids, most of whom are black. And it's just more brainwashing. It's more indoctrination. And by the way, just what jobs are these kids being prepared for by this class? How does this help them make a better life? It doesn't. It turns them into liberal Democrats. Now, fortunately, the high school has announced this class is no longer going to be offered. And that is a good one. Now, over in Schenectady, New York, Page Elementary teachers apparently started inserting these flyers into the backpacks of students to send home to give to the parents. And the flyer was out there basically bashing Trump and Devos and basically saying that you've got to save our schools. They're going to bring this voucher program in, and people with money are going to send their kids to private school, and it will harm the public schools, blah, 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 blah. And the parents got very, very angry at being proselytized using their own children. Just as a lot of parents were very angry on how the schools were filling the kids' heads with all the terrible things Trump was going to do as president. None of this has anything to do with education. And I think it might be time to consider a law that says schools below the level of high school are not allowed to engage in political activism or propagandizing of students. Even understanding that there's already a lot of propaganda in the approved curriculum. But I mean, this is an absolute waste of taxpayer money. These kids are not getting an education that will help them have a better life. They're being indoctrinated. Now, over in Washington State, there's a kindergarten teacher who's getting some news because in the name of gender equality, she is forbidding the boy students, this is kindergarten, she's forbidding the boy students to play with Legos while telling the girls they must play with them. Because we're going to have gender equality here. You know, I don't know why the boys like Legos and the girls don't. By the way, that's not true. I got a grandniece who just loves Legos. She thinks they're great. But I mean, this is ridiculous. This is utterly ridiculous. And this is a prime example of what I mean about liberalism being based on an absolute fraud. Because the primary foundation of the liberal political agenda is this idea that you can change what is inside the minds of people by changing the environment around them. And it all goes back to Margaret Mead's book, Coming of Age in Samoa, in which Mead claimed that she'd found a society where young people went into adulthood without all the normal traumas of adolescence, proving that those traumas were something imposed by society and were not in our genes. And the book was a fraud. And the government of Samoa has come on out saying it's absolutely a fraud. Mead made many mistakes in it that are easy to identify. She assumed Samoa was sexually promiscuous because Hawaii of the same era was. And Samoa's never been sexually promiscuous. They're a highly monogamous society. Each of these islands is a separate little world. The fact that we're all in the same ocean does not, in fact, mean that you can make grand assumptions across several different places. And what happened was Margaret Mead took up friends with two young Samoan ladies, and just was talking with them. And the Samoans, like most Polynesians, like to talk story. And to be polite, told Margaret Mead what Mead obviously wanted to hear, not knowing she was going to write a book. And Mead is still lionized by the liberal establishment. But this is why the liberals keep making such dumb mistakes. Boys and girls are different at birth. And it is hereditary, not environmental. And this kindergarten teacher, I mean, this is nonsense. To tell the boys they can't play with Legos and the girls they must in the name of gender equality. I mean, you can mandate equality at the expense of personal freedom. And that's always going to be the case. Because if you mandate equality, then nobody has the freedom to maybe be a little better or a little worse, or to just go their own way. There's been another video released by the pro-life group Live Action, and it shows Planned Parenthood staffers saying that their clinics only offer ultrasounds to women who are seeking abortions. They are not made available to women who are inquiring after prenatal care. So this idea that this organization is even called Planned Parenthood is now ridiculous. They should call it planned abortion or coerced abortion, because they're not helping any woman plan to be a parent. Now, up in New York, Anthony Weiner, Anthony, what is wrong with your head? Apparently, federal prosecutors are seriously considering filing charges. And apparently this involves his having an online relationship with an underage girl that was sexually explicit, trading of photographs and so forth. And apparently a lot of very damaging information has been found on that laptop that was seized from Weiner, that was also found to contain Hillary Clinton's State Department emails, which is what forced James Comey to reopen the investigation, which was the death blow to Hillary's campaign. And it's not like Comey had a choice. Anthony Weiner put him in that situation with his reckless behavior. And Hillary Clinton, if she had been playing by the rules, there never would have been an FBI investigation to begin with. Now, do you remember a while back there was this shooting and killing of 5 people in a Burlington, Washington mall? And the shooter was named Arkan Setin, and security cameras show him entering the mall, walking out, then coming back in with a rifle and opening fire. And he's confessed to the 5 murders. It's now turned out that this individual is a permanent resident alien with a green card. Now, green card does not allow you to vote, and yet election officials have confirmed that this guy was illegally registered to vote and voted in 3 elections in the state of Washington in 2014, 2015, and 2016. Donald Trump is right. There needs to be a full investigation into our election system, and especially the election system, the elections of last year. It has to be done. And we need a new election system. We've got 2 years to demand election reform. Now, down in Tennessee, we're starting to see a lot of states start to do things like this. Tennessee has just passed a bill that declares any federal and international gun laws null and void within their state borders. They're exerting their state sovereignty. And I think it's a good idea, especially when you have, the liberal establishment still out there with their gun grabbing, when you have the United Nations that wants global disarmament of everybody except the favored armies. Now, do you remember a while back there was that ugly situation up in Chicago where these 4 black individuals kidnapped a mentally disabled white guy, tied him up, and tortured him, streaming it live on Facebook. And it was horrific. And CBS Radio actually tried to imply that the perpetrators were white and the victim was black, and they got called on that. Excuse me. I have a frog in my throat. All right, let's see if we can get back here. Now, the defense attorneys for these people are complaining that the suspects have received death threats. Now, I don't agree with issuing death threats, but why is anybody surprised after what they did? And I find it appalling these defense attorneys are trying to portray these perpetrators who committed this crime as some kind of victim. And that really is ridiculous, and maybe that's the defense attorney's strategy for the trial, that they're somehow victims of society. They were driven to do what they did by Donald Trump or some such nonsense and try and get them off. And he's complaining that these perpetrators have been denounced in the media before anything's been proven. They live streamed what they were doing. That's all the proof you need to put them in jail. So it's getting a little ridiculous out there. Now then, you've probably heard recently how certain pharmaceutical companies and executives have decided to embark on a campaign of price gouging America's chronically ill. And they'll have exclusive market rights to a very necessary and in-demand medication, and without any justification whatsoever, they'll multiply the price 5, 10 times. Completely out of control. And it's certainly not justified by the business. The original selling price was calculated based on amortizing R&D, FDA approval, and the cost of actually producing the drugs. They just decided they're going to get more money because these people have no choice but to buy this medication from them. Donald Trump is starting to look at that situation, and he's calling on the executives of pharmaceutical companies to reduce prices, to keep these prices down, and says he's willing to ease certain regulations to expedite the process. But we have to get the price of America's health care down. We're the most expensive health care on the world, 33rd in quality, and America's overall health is considered poor. That's a broken system. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, as you know, Obamacare is under attack right now. They're talking about repealing it, replacing it. And by the way, I need to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates I missed at the top of the hour. And why is it all so costly? And the reality is Obamacare was supposed to make health care, especially health insurance, affordable to all, and it was exactly the opposite. The policy prices went up, the deductibles went up, and Obama lied when he said if you like your current plan, you can keep your current plan. That didn't happen. It's all about the money. And by way of illustration, one of our listeners just sent me this wonderful little graphic regarding the health insurance company's CEO's total compensation for 2014. We don't have any more recent numbers. David Cordani, head of Cigna, makes $27.2 million, or $104,000 per day. Stephen Hemsley of United Health makes $66.1 million, or $250,000 per day. Michael Niedorf at Centene, $28.1 million, or $107,000 per day. Mark Bertolini from Aetna makes $15 million, or $57,000 per day. Bruce Broussard at Humana makes $13.1 million, or $50,000 per day. Joseph Swedish at Anthem, which is part of Blue Cross Blue Shield, makes $8.1 million, or $31,000 per day. Average earnings of full-time wage and salary workers in the same year was $41,000. It's all about the money. It's not about your health. It never has been. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Alex in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. I just wanted to ask you, why is China so pissed off at us right now? Do you know?
Well, there are two reasons. First of all, the previous administration decided they were going to make a big deal about China's building up the islands in the South China Sea, which are their territory acknowledged by the Cairo Convention at the close of World War II. And the other issue, of course, has to do with the relationship between the United States and Taiwan. Now, Taiwan has said we're an independent nation. They call themselves the Republic of China. Mainland China views Taiwan as a rebellious province, and that could break on out. And it's very difficult navigating that political maelstrom. What is important to remember about the Chinese culture is that getting somebody to change course or back down or admit error is extremely difficult. It's hard enough here in the U.S. It's a very cultural thing for many of the Asian countries, having to do with saving face. And so that's what makes it really, really difficult to try and navigate these issues. One of the big problems that TPP was facing before Donald Trump pulled the plug was the requirement for all signing nations to ban GMO labeling. Japan already mandates GMO labeling, and it would be a serious loss of face for the Japanese government to have to reverse themselves on that. And that's why they were kind of stalling and dragging their feet on that issue.
Wow. Hey, Michael, you were talking about Obamacare, and just to put it in perspective, if a couple that is 62 each, the wife is 62 and the husband 62, and they make $63,000 a year, which is $31,500 each,
yep,
for a silver plan, a medium silver plan, their premiums are $1,300 a month, and their deductibles like $12,000, $6,000 each.
Yep.
Where they would have to pay full cost. Now, if that same couple were to make $15,000 a year, it would still be $1,300 a month, but the government would pay that $1,300, and it would have a lower deductible. So either way, whether the government's paying it, which is huge money that they're putting out for that, or if they were to pay it, it's huge money. But typically what happens is they can't afford the $1,300 a month. I couldn't. I mean, that's outrageous.
It absolutely is outrageous. But you need to remember, the Affordable Care Act was actually written by these health insurance companies who expected to make billions of new profits, and they were going to, give the government a piece of the action in taxes. That didn't even work out. Some of these companies are now demanding taxpayer-funded bailouts. Alex, got to let you go. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And our discussion on the issue of Obamacare has triggered quite a bit of email. And one of them says the tiny guy taxpayer should never be mandated to make some Wall Street tycoon rich. Somebody wrote on in and say, you need to talk about the healthcare system they have in the Netherlands and Germany and other European countries where the government regulates the profit margin of the health insurers. That's beginning to sound like a good idea to me as well. And another one says, my cardiologist agrees with you on the cost and quality of healthcare in the U.S. He and I had a nice talk about it last month at my appointment. Now then, a little while ago on the show, I mentioned how Tennessee had passed a law saying that all federal and international gun regulations were null and void inside their borders. Missouri is looking at a bill that will ban all vaccines containing mercury and other metals inside their states. And this is a very smart thing for them to do, because were Congress dumb enough to try and pass a bill saying that you are required to have these vaccines with mercury and to use them, Donald Trump is not going to sign that, because he's obviously aware of that issue. And it would be very difficult for members of Congress to justify to their constituents in the coming elections in 2018 why they did that, given that the FDA actually banned mercury preservatives like thimerosal back in 1999. It's not supposed to be there even today. The vaccine companies keep putting it in, and they got away with it because the previous administration was kind of looking the other way. But I think Missouri would be well advised to move ahead with this, along with other states, and you're going to start seeing the autism rates start to fall off. And we need to get ahead of that, because at the current rate of growth, by 2030, half of all children will be diagnosed with some form of autism. That means half of the human American population will be unavailable to the workforce, and a large portion of the available workforce will be tied up caring for these autistic children. So I think that's a very good thing to do, and I think the other states ought to follow suit. Now, story coming out of government slaves. The same Associated Press that was caught pushing fake news about Donald Trump is now pushing fake science about vaccines. And just like they did with human-caused global warming, it's always, the science is settled. The science is settled. It's already been, you just pay attention to us. Well, isn't it a good thing for us that Christopher Columbus didn't think the issue of the shape of the earth was settled? Now, here's the reality, coming out of a science background myself. Science is never settled. There's never a hard ending to a line of inquiry. There's always going to be new data, new instruments, new experiments that will force you to revise earlier theories, and sometimes abandon them completely. In the time of Galileo, the science was settled that the sun moved around the earth, and the earth was the center of all the cosmos. That had been the prevailing theory for 400 years. Science is never settled. When somebody says the science is settled, they're using people in white lab coats to sell you products you may not want. There is an issue out there. Look how hard they are working to try and keep the lid on this. I mean, look at the firestorm around the documentary Vaxxed. Being yanked from film festivals. It's being taken out of screenings under pressure from pharmaceutical companies. If there's nothing there, why would they care? Look how hard they're trying to protect their secret. It's like the same thing with the Holocaust. The Holocaust is the only event in history that you can go to jail for asking questions about it. It's obvious some dark secret is being protected. So let's talk a little bit about computers here. Google's algorithm for detecting cyber attack needs a little bit of work, because Google is now blocking access to the entire British National Health System network because it mistook the amount of traffic it's receiving as a cyber attack. And the NHS IT department had to send out a mass email saying that Google is now blocking it and suggesting they move to another search engine, such as Bing, to bypass the problem. Not a lot of Careful thinking in these things, I guess. Now, apparently, private details of 2.5 million PlayStation and Xbox users have been stolen in another major hack. And I think it's time for everybody to start rethinking this idea of having your private information, especially your credit card details, on somebody else's computer, where it's just wide open, especially now that the credit card companies and banks have changed the rules. So if you are the victim of fraud, you will pay it. When they were first trying to convince you to use their little pieces of plastic, if you were the victim of fraud, they would cover the losses. Well, the losses have become so extreme they can't do that anymore. So I think it's time to pull back in, pull off our credit card details. I certainly don't do that. I remember how, and we avoid those credit cards with the little contactless radio receivers in them. Because Claire actually got hit with one of these people walking around the shopping mall a couple of Christmases ago. Just a backpack with a computer and some other equipment from eBay, and they were scarfing off all these credit card details, and Claire's credit card wound up being used somewhere on the mainland to buy concert tickets, I guess it was. We had one of our credit card companies that actually said, we are mandating the use of these radio chip-enabled credit cards. Your old non-radio credit cards are being disabled. Here's your new credit card. At which point we just closed the account. Said, that's it. We're not, if we are not allowed the freedom to protect ourselves against fraud, and you're not going to protect us against fraud, then what's the whole point? Now, if you are as old as I am, you will remember a type of printer driver, a standard, one of the earliest standards, called PostScript. And apparently researchers at a German university have found a cross-site printing bug in PostScript. I'm amazed it's still around, just like I'm amazed that Flash is still around, which is a major security headache. And apparently if you have a PostScript driver on your printer, it can be used as an attack vector for denial of service, code execution, forced resets, even bricking the targets. My solution to all this cybercrime, since the NSA can't seem to do anything about it, is to catch just one cybercriminal and crucify him or her on live streaming video. And if they're in decent health, it's going to take them at least a week to die. And you stream it live, and I'll bet you 90% of the problem is going to go away at that point. Now, over in the world of Linux, which is relatively safe only because, like the early days of the Macintosh, there aren't enough machines to make it worth the cybercriminals' while. That's changing. They have an encryption app called CryptKeeper. And apparently a recent update to one of the libraries used by CryptKeeper has opened up a bug in which CryptKeeper now has a universal password, the letter P. And unfortunately, CryptKeeper is not being updated and maintained by its original developer anymore, so you may want to look for another solution in order to secure your data. I would recommend that you grab my article on challenging the NSA and just come up with your own system of encryption for your own internal use on your desktop computer. Because then the NSA can't get in there because they don't know what encryption you're using. The hackers can't get in there. The cybercriminals can't read your files. We put out 6 challenges to the NSA over the course of a year. And the NSA was well motivated to be able to crack one of them in order to discourage ordinary citizens from saying, hey, I can write strong encryption. So government's not going to respect your privacy. Government can't protect your privacy. You must take that responsibility. Now, down in Australia, they have a section in their Copyright Act, Section 115A, and this was an amendment introduced in 2015 that requires Internet service providers to block websites that are in violation of the copyright law, mostly things like Pirate Bay. And by the way, I'm not saying it's okay to violate copyright law. But it turned out that simply by changing your default DNS settings to use an outside service like Google would completely bypass it. because the websites were being blocked by the ISPs at the DNS level. Like most things out of government, it cost a lot of money, the politicians made a lot of speeches, and it doesn't actually work to do what it was claimed to do. All right, we're going to go ahead and grab a phone call. Ralph in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael, how you doing, sir? Regarding the credit card, the RIFE chip.
Yes.
Well, that's what we did is with ours, my wife and I, because they did do the same thing like they did to you. They canceled our old card because they issued a new one. We damaged took the chip out. And I don't know if you know or if you heard, but, you try it 3 times and then they'll ask you to swipe.
Yes.
Then it goes through. Now, the only thing is at one CVS, it wouldn't let me do that, so I had to use a card that did have a chip. But someone earlier on RBN, a caller, mentioned that, so that's what we did, and that seems to work.
Well, again, I don't know why this is being pushed on us, and again, it seems there's almost a deliberate plan to make us increasingly vulnerable to cyber criminals. And what was really ironic was the RFID-enabled card that was copied off from Claire wouldn't work at the contactless terminal at our local Office Depot. We'd go on in there and we'd wave the card, nothing would happen, and the clerk said, yeah, this thing never works. And so we'd go ahead and swipe. And so it doesn't work for its intended purpose, it's just another vector for the criminals to steal our money.
That's what it sounds like, more for nefarious reasons. But also, the other thing I wanted to call in, you might have heard, is something called the Outernet. Have you ever heard of that?
The Alternet, yes.
No. Outer is instead of inner, outside.
The Outernet. No, actually I haven't. Is it another dark net?
Well, it's actually, you cannot send, but you can receive, and it's like for an inexpensive price for $89, that's with the charger. It's cheaper if you just get it without the charger. You put it together with and I think it's a Raspberry Pi little circuit board, but they give you the kit, put it together, and it kind of works like XM radio, Sirius radio antenna, even though you can aim the dish at, with our area, Galaxy 19, and receive information for free. It's a small outfit. If you type in Outernet, you'll see the information, but it's like an outfit that came from New York, and it's a small little company, I guess, and they got crowdfunding to get it going, but it's designed so the world can get information. And you don't have to pay for it. You just buy the device, and you're able to get it or one together.
I remember when Claire and I were living in Washington State, we were way outside any area served by cable TV, and we couldn't even receive much over the air. So we went ahead and we got one of the early satellite receivers, the small dishes, not the big K-band units, but the first one. I forget the company we signed up with. But one of the cool things about it was you could get internet over that satellite dish, but downlink only. You had to have a terminal on a telephone modem for uploading. But for most people where they're simply typing in a URL and then they get the page over the satellite feed, it actually worked rather well.
Huh. Well, the reason why I bring that up is maybe RBN can be broadcast on that. I don't know what the contact would be, how it would work, but to broadcast your information, because apparently you get up to 20 megs.
Well, we'd have to find out what the user base is. I mean, if there's only 16 or 22 people using it, it's not going to pencil out for us. If they had an audience in the millions, then it's obviously something that we would be interested in looking at.
It started in 2014, so I just stumbled onto it for looking for something else on YouTube. And anyways, I thought maybe you heard of it because it's new to me.
Well, it's new to me too as well, and I'm looking at their webpage right now, and I'll take a peek and see what it is, because I do like high tech when it works.
Yeah, I'm going to get one of those kids and try it out. All right, well,
all right.
Appreciate it.
Thanks an awful lot. And if you are a computer hardware lover, those Raspberry Pis are very cool. Asus now has a single board hobbyist computer out, and they're actually getting quite capable. The Asus one actually has 4K display. For those of you who've actually bought a 4K TV, and with my eyesight, it would be a waste of money. Now then, apparently yet another hijack hole has been found in the Netgear routers. And apparently this hole allows an attacker with access to the router to harvest the administrator's access password. And I'm starting to think that these are not programming errors or goofs. I think these are the back doors the NSA has ordered all these companies to put into their products to allow the NSA to come on in and, well, according to Edward Snowden, steal pictures of our naked significant others to amuse themselves with. But it's another one there. Here's a really alarming story, I think, especially when everyone's talking about the potential for war and this and that. ZDNet is reporting that apparently the Pentagon computer systems are very easy to penetrate by hackers. And the security researcher who's warned the Pentagon that this was going on months ago is saying that the hackers are likely already inside the Pentagon. All that money and they can't keep their computers secure? Boy, talk about military incompetence. By the way, speaking of incompetence, the Pentagon has an anti-ISIS online propaganda program, and it's supposed to be psychological operations aimed at countering ISIS online. And apparently, in typical Pentagon fashion, they've employed people with little or no knowledge of Islam, no Arabic language skills, no awareness of the Arabic culture, according to the Associated Press. It's just more cronyism, more military-industrial complex thinking here. Now let's get on back to, well, actually, we're going to take a break for commercials here, and then we're going to come on back and talk about Cheryl Atkinson, because this is an interesting case that's developing. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, Cheryl Atkinson was a former CBS correspondent. She did a lot of important stories and eventually had to leave CBS under very questionable circumstances. Now, part of the situation that's going on, she's got another show elsewhere, and she wanted to get her FBI file to find out if the FBI had been spying on her, and more to the point, if it was the FBI that had been hacking into her personal computers, because she's had her computers entered into, and she had 3 different independent forensics exams that all indicated the intruders were using software proprietary to a U.S. intelligence agency. And the government is dragging their heels. Now, under the law, you have a right to see your FBI file if one, in fact, exists. And if you ask and they don't have one, they'll start one. But the government is not cooperating with her lawsuit. And without even filing the required paperwork, government officials simply fail to show up for a deposition. And Cheryl is convinced that it was the FBI hacking into her computer. They didn't have the legal authority to do so. Now they're just going to try and wait it on out and hope she'll go away. Now, apparently, LG is out with a 5,000 resolution monitor for computers. It's supposed to be the follow-on to Apple's Thunderbolt display. And apparently it's got a problem, a major fault. If it's sitting within 6 feet of a wireless router, the display will flicker. Move it closer and the monitor becomes unusable. And an LG Electronics support person said, yes, they know about the problem, but it only happens to the 5K monitors and not the other LG monitors. Now, LG monitors generally are pretty good. I've got 2 LG monitors here. But don't you, test these things? When I worked at the Ohana Learning Foundation, and we were making educational DVDs, because of the fact that every DVD manufacturer implements the DVD standards somewhat differently, we had an entire room of every major brand of DVD player there was. And we would take our master disc in and we would make it work on every one of those before we would ship it out for duplication. And if it failed on any one of those units, it was back to, recreating the disc find out what was wrong. Now, it would be nice if we did start seeing enforcement of certain standards again, like we used to have in this country, instead of everybody going their own way. But until then, if you're putting out a product, you've got to test it, you've got to check it. There was a software company that I was briefly associated with back during my Amiga developer days that sent out a disk with a flight simulator game on it infected with malware. And they didn't check it, and the company was driven out of business as a result. All right, we're going to take a break for station identification. Back with Don Wiskin and Extendivite after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, and joining us for the first segment of our third hour is Don Wiskin of Extendivite. And, of course, you've been hearing his commercials on our program here. You see his ads over at the WhatReallyHappened.com and a lot of other websites. And it's always good to have an advertiser whose product is something that you yourself believe in and use, and Claire and I certainly use this as well. And I like to have Don on the show every once in a while to talk about his product because we do live in an age where the medical industrial complex is starting to look like not only are they not interested in our health, that they're actually a threat to it. And so more and more we have to take responsibility for our own health, and we have to exercise our freedom to choose our own medical care, even if it's unconventional. So, Don, welcome to the show.
Very much for having me, Michael.
Well, again, we've often talked about your product here and all of the good things that it contains, and why don't you go down that list one more time of the ingredients and what each of the ingredients do?
We have garlic, cayenne, bilberry, hawthorn, ginkgo biloba, valerian, and milk thistle. And they do a variety of things, like hawthorn, for instance, is an approved cardiac tonic in Germany. It's approved by the Commission. And, you know, garlic, as we all know, does a whole bunch of things, but mostly, you know, garlic helps to clean out your arteries and kill off some yeast, boost your natural immune system. Like, for instance, I have one of those really bad colds right now, but you would never know it just based on, you know, how I'm acting and talking. So, you know, it does boost your natural immune system, but it does take a while, 4 or 5 months. But we have cayenne in there too, which stimulates blood flow. It helps to dilate arterial walls and cuts through the mucus in the veins. It increases the circulation to the extremities. Most people don't know that your heart doesn't pump below your knee. Everything below your knee, the calf muscle, pumps the blood back up. That's why I tell people to sit there. You know, if you're not moving around much, if you're getting edema, the water around the ankles, and your legs are sore, when you're sitting there, it's put your heels on the ground and treat it like you're driving a car. Just push your feet down and lift them back up, but leave your heels flat on the ground. Works great. We have the valerian in there. It does a lot of different things, but I like to think it's in there to help calm you because, well, when my mother was having her heart problems before I knew about this stuff, she would have anxiety and panic attacks, and the valerian helps to calm that down.
Well, valerian is the natural source from which Valium is derived. And when you talk about all of these natural ingredients and how they are approved for medicinal use in other countries, the model in the United States is that the medical industrial complex does not want anything approved for use that you could possibly grow for yourself or get from the grocery store. They want you basically forced to be dependent on their patented synthetic medications, for which they can charge these sky-high prices. And the reality is a lot of what comes out of pharmaceutical corporations is derived from natural sources, and then they'll just tinker around with the molecule enough to be able to qualify for a patent. And very often they're not really paying attention to what that change of the molecule might do in the long run, as long as they can get it past FDA approval. But Digitalin, of course, is made from foxglove, and Valium from valerian root again, and that's a lot of those sources out there. And the reason I prefer using these natural compounds has to do with an idea I call coevolution. And that is when you are using something that is produced by nature, whether it's hawthorn or milk thistle or any of these things, you're dealing with biochemistry that has co-evolved with our biochemistry over millions of years. When you're taking in one of these synthetic molecules produced in the laboratories of the pharmaceutical corporations, you're dealing with a chemical that has never existed before in nature, and very often your body doesn't really know what to do with it, which is where so many of these horrible side effects can come from. And I wonder what is wrong with the American consumer, that they see these very glitzy commercials for pharmaceuticals on TV that are expensively produced, and they'll sell this medication. And by the way, the United States is one of, I think, only 3 industrialized nations that actually allows prescription medications to be advertised on TV. So you'll go to your doctor and say, I want this, and the doctor will say, oh, okay, fine. And they'll write out the prescription, and everybody makes their money. But there's, because of the law it requires it, there's that very fast-talking individual at the end of the commercial saying, you know, use of this medication can lead to, and then they'll run down a whole long list of these horrible symptoms that it seems like the cure is definitely going to be worse than the disease. We're going to take a second here to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. We're talking with Don Wiskin of Extendivite and natural medicines versus the synthetic chemicals coming out of the pharmaceutical industries at huge, huge prices. Now, one of the issues that we have seen lately are these pharmaceutical companies just ratcheting up their prices once they have a market monopoly. And for this reason, this desire for a market monopoly is why they're working so hard to outlaw things like marijuana, which has proven medicinal qualities, but they don't want it out there because you can grow it in your backyard, and no corporation can make money off of it that way. And it's part of that enforced dependency to keep us constantly making the corporations richer. But a lot of the stuff that you're talking about in Extendivite has been known about for a very, very long time. When I was a kid, I had this book. It was the first edition of a book printed in early 1900 of natural remedies for common ailments, and I donated it along with some other books to a museum that opened up in my hometown. And I was kind of sorry I'd given it away following that episode where we found out that Claire's joint pain had been caused by formaldehyde precursors in commercial products, and none of the orthodox medical establishments we'd gone to picked up on it. We had to find it for ourselves. Fortunately, somebody's actually reprinted that book out, and they sent me a copy, so I'm glad I have that in my library again. And all of these things in Extendivite are in it with all the wonderful things that they can definitely do. And again, there's nothing dangerous in here. You don't need to rely on somebody with a white lab coat and a clipboard to say, this stuff isn't going to hurt you too much. If you have an Extendivite commercial, there's no need for the voice at the end of the commercial saying, if you use this, all these bad things can happen. And that, I think, is very reassuring in these days where we're beginning to understand that we ought not to be totally trusting that doctors aren't always the really nice people movies and TVs tell us they are.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned, Michael, that the drug companies, when they find a good client base, they start raising their price, because this is February, and February is Heart Month, and every year for the last 18 years in February we've had a sale. And right now, a lot of people call and order their 1 year's supply. We have a ton of people who just buy once a year, and they do it in February. So right now it's $129, including shipping for a 1 year or for a 4-month supply. And on Amazon, we have it at $57.50 per bottle. So if you have Prime, you don't even pay shipping on it. So, but you know, we're in Canada. We need to charge shipping because it's expensive to ship from Canada. It's actually cheaper to ship from Amazon. But remember, I've talked about the doctor that was, had high blood pressure, irregular heartbeat, shortness of breath. He started taking our product about 4 years ago. He called into a radio show I was on earlier this month, earlier in January, and I've got that testimonial on my website. So at heartdrop.com, you can actually scroll down on the home page and listen to Dr. Joe talk about how it changed his whole world. And he's a geriatric doctor. He also talks about how he has a friend who, a really nice guy, he's a doctor. He had a heart attack and had surgery done. And they told him it would be over a year before he got back to work. Well, Dr. Joe told him about the Extendivite. He got on it and was back to work in 6 months. So there is a lot of doctors now taking our product because they're not able to fix themselves. And, well, we had one man, I'm hoping he's going to call in sometime to one of our shows. He was told to go home and prepare to die because his heart was in such bad shape. Well, he called and ordered the Extendivite and started taking it. His cardiologist passed away. He just got another cardiologist. He passed away. He's on his third cardiologist, and he's still alive 2.5 years later after they told him to go home and prepare his will and get ready to pass away.
Well, that's rather amazing. I mean, I've been to your website. I've read all these testimonials, and to the best of my knowledge, nobody's ever had any kind of a contraindication, any kind of a bad reaction. And you would expect that to be the case because these are all natural chemicals that are part of the same biochemistry that we are. And that is such an important point that people need to remember is these whiz-bang medicines that are being patented by the pharmaceutical corporations are intentionally designed to be patentable, and thus they don't have an equivalent out there in nature. And it can be very, very dangerous. We've seen how reckless these companies are with their vaccines, how reckless they've been with GMO. And it's really, you've got to take responsibility for your own health. I grew up believing in doctors and the orthodox medical establishment, and this experience with Claire really opened my eyes that it's just about the money. It's about selling product. They're not really that interested in actually solving the problem. They want to treat chronic symptoms.
Yeah, which is really a shame because a lot of these problems come from our exposure to metals and some of the food we're eating. One of the things that Dr. Joe talked about, well, on that clip on heartdrop.com, is that we're all deficient in magnesium because of commercial farming. It stripped the magnesium right out of the soil, and we need to start taking supplements. He actually tells his geriatric patients to take some magnesium, and in a couple of months they're thanking him because it helped so much. And he thinks the magnesium helped him with his shortness of breath, which could lead to congestive heart failure. So, I'm sorry, that was the irregular heartbeat.
Ah, okay. You saved so many people, it's hard to keep them straight.
Well, that's it. I've been at this for 18 years now, and we helped so many. It makes my job worthwhile. It makes me feel really good that people are actually getting better. I have a friend who had a stroke last year in February, and he was pretty messed up. His doctors told him to get his affairs in order because he wasn't going to be around long. His heart was down to 22% ejection fraction. He started taking the Extendivite in April, and he didn't really get that involved in it. He took a 6-month supply over 8 months, but then during the last 4 or 5 months, he started being more regular. He went in December, and they did an MRI, and they said that his ejection fraction was at 34%.
That's a good improvement.
He's doing much, much better. And his heart was enlarged. It's shrinking back to normal size. He's looking better, too. He's looking a lot better. But when I went in and saw him in the hospital after he had that stroke, he didn't even know his own name, didn't know his last name, didn't know where he lived. But they had him on one of those clot-busting drugs, and he was very, very lucky that, it did work for him. They, made him go 24 hours without eating, and he was doing much, much better after that.
Well, that reminds me of my father's situation where he had some kind of an event, and the doctors, for some reason, loaded him up on blood thinners that just made it a lot worse. One of the things, I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent here. One of the problems I had with the Obamacare mandate that all medical records be computerized is it means the records can be changed without leaving a trace. And in the past, when you were looking at bad behavior by doctors, you had that paper record of what had gone on that you could look at and see, here's where the mistake was made. and that line of evidence is no longer available to people who are being injured by medical mistakes. And there are a lot of medical mistakes. I mean, everyone's always talking about the gun grabbers, how many people are killed by firearms in this country every year. It's minuscule compared to the people who are killed by medical mistakes in this country. It's just huge.
It is, and it's actually ridiculous how, you know, so many people die so young from something that may have been prevented if they had to just open their eyes to something else. But, you know, unfortunately, in today's world, everybody seems to have this white coat syndrome, and they all want to believe what their doctor has to say. And that's why I'm so glad Dr. Joe finally called in. He's been 4 years on Extendivite, and he finally called in and left his testimonial. He's told me he would, but it's great because now there's a doctor on our site who's saying, you know, if you're sitting on the fence, try it.
Well, you know, I'm looking right here at a webpage over at NPR where medical errors are the #3 cause of U.S. deaths. And yes, Hollywood TV shows and films try and portray doctors as always being wonderful people. But we know from recent events that's not always the case. There was that doctor who was sent to prison for 45 years because all during his career he was telling perfectly healthy people they had cancer in order to sell them highly profitable radiation and chemotherapy treatments, which are very damaging. Radiation will bring a cancer back somewhere down the road. So he was actually giving these people cancer for a fast buck. And what really strikes me as kind of a harsh statement on the priorities of our government, this doctor was not thrown in prison for the harm he caused his patients. He was thrown in prison for defrauding Medicare. That's what they got him on. And all these other people, they went to this doctor trusting and believing, and again, this guy was just saying, oh, well, you've got cancer, and, you know, we're going to sell you all kinds of stuff.
I'm very lucky. My doctor is very aware of what I'm doing. He's quite impressed with what I'm doing. He likes my health. I mean, he saw my medical records, and, you know, he knew that I had lost 35% of my heart to damaged tissue and was supposed to go on disability because, you know, I was down to about around a 38% ejection fraction myself. And, you know, he's very open to it. He knows that I can't take the cholesterol-reducing drugs. They make me so sick I don't even know my own name. I can't even think straight when I'm taking those. So,
well, now they're beginning to think that statins aren't really doing the job that they're doing. And I lost my youngest brother a few years ago, where he had suffered a mild stroke, and they put him on these drugs to get rid of the plaque in his arteries, but apparently what they're discovering is it doesn't wear it off gradually and slowly. It causes big pieces to break off and get stuck in very important places inside the heart, and he died of a heart attack just a couple of months after going on this medication. So it's a real mess out there. According to Johns Hopkins, 250,000 Americans die each year from medical errors, and those are just the errors. We're not including the people who are dying from deliberate malpractice, like this individual with the cancer treatments, or the fact that some of the medications and procedures are all about maximizing profit and not necessarily what is good for the patient. Anyway, we're down to about a minute and a half before we're going to hit a commercial break. So one more time, give us your website and where people can go to get this stuff.
Heartdrop.com. That's HEARTDROP.com. Our toll-free number is 1-877-928-8822, and you can also type Extendivite with an X into Amazon, get it there, or you can find the link on our pay page. And every 7 minutes, I'm in Canada, every 7 minutes someone in Canada dies from a stroke or a heart attack. We're 10 times smaller than the United States, so that means every 70 seconds in the USA, somebody dies from a heart attack or a stroke.
I would say it's probably higher given our dietary problems down here.
Well, we have the same dietary problems.
Ah, well, okay. I thought the food in Canada was much better the last time I was there. All right, well... Well,
I don't know. I think we're a mirror image of the States.
Oh, I feel so sorry for you. I apologize profusely.
Just poor politicians.
All right, well, Don, thanks an awful lot. We'll have you back on the show somewhere down the road here. Once again, the product is called Extendivite. And Claire and I use it. A lot of people benefit from it. Nobody's been harmed by it. And if you are as worried about the ethics, morality of the medical industrial complex, you might want to look at this product. We'll be back after these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I'm already getting a lot of email regarding Don Wiskin and Extendivite and the pertinent questions I forwarded on to him. And I'm looking at this article about this study from Johns Hopkins where medical mistakes kill 250,000 Americans every single year. And then when you add into that deliberate malfeasance, like telling patients they have a disease so you can sell them the cure, or inventing a disease so you can sell pills. Remember the guy who came up with ADHD shortly before he passed away, he admitted it was a fictitious disease. They made it up in order to sell pills. I'm finding it very hard to find a moral difference between the giant pharmaceutical corporations and the guy down on the street corner selling the CIA's heroin and cocaine. Anyway. Now then, apparently a Federal Reserve employee has been caught for using Federal Reserve computers to mine bitcoins. And I'm sure they were angry with him not only for misuse of the Federal Reserve's computer, but because the Federal Reserve does not like the idea of Bitcoin, virtual currencies, or indeed any alternative to their precious Federal Reserve note. A little bit of irony there in the background. Now, over in Great Britain, they have approved a trial for genetically modified super wheat. And a lot of people are very concerned about that because of the long, tragic history of these test fields contaminating natural crops all around them. Remember, we had this big stink here in the United States where farmers up in Oregon who thought they were growing natural wheat and sent it off to China for sale, and China tested it and said, no, there's altered genes in here. And the shipment was rejected. And they finally found out these fields in Oregon were contaminated by pollen from an as yet unapproved genetically modified wheat that was being grown several states away. Monsanto's official position is if you have a 10-yard safety zone around your field, that you are safe from contamination or from contaminating your neighbors. And that's completely absurd. Pollen is carried on the wind. It's carried by bees. It's carried by birds. When the first humans arrived here in the Hawaiian Islands, the place was just blooming with plants. How do you think they got here? It's amazing. They're being very reckless, and genetic technology is the most dangerous technology we've ever played with, far worse than nuclear. We're tinkering with the code of life, and any one of the mistakes they made could turn out to be an extinction-level event. More and more people around the world are getting concerned about it. Brazil is considering refusing all GMO imports from the United States, just as China and Russia already do. So Monsanto's solution is to bribe the U.S. government to ban GMO labeling and force us to buy it. Now, we're getting word that police are raiding the Standing Rock camps where the protesters, the Native Americans, have been staying as they protest the Dakota Access Pipeline. Unfortunately, Trump is moving forward with the pipeline, and the Army Corps of Engineers has been ordered to grant the easements to allow the construction to continue. And this is one of those situations where there are competing issues and agendas. But we have to remember the Native Americans do have a point. These pipelines are not safe. Now, I'm hoping that Trump, by insisting on having U.S.-made pipes, is assuming that they'll be of higher quality than the pipes that are brought in from other countries. Because apparently in Worth County, Iowa, there's been yet another pipeline leak, dumping 140,000 gallons of diesel fuel near Hanlantown. And again, you don't see the corporate media reporting on the spills unless they're really big, like the Deepwater Horizon. Phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to take some phone calls here. I'm going to start with Phil in Montreal. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Phil, are you there?
Yeah, right here. Are you listening to me now?
I can. I'm not going to buy a condo from you, but I'm hearing you.
Okay, Mike. I just wanted to give you a heads up on something that I just found out very recently. You know the Tristan nasal spray?
I've seen it. I've heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if you look up the ingredients, the last ingredient on the list is thimerosal.
Well,
I wonder how many of your over-the-counter nasal spray with thimerosal.
You know, it never occurred to me that it might be in products other than vaccines, but its function is supposed to be as a preservative. So, yeah, it could actually be in a lot of other over-the-counter medications
right
here.
Yeah,
I mean, the FDA banned it in 1999. Why is it still being put on out there?
Well, you look it up yourself. I mean, I couldn't believe it myself. But most people don't know what thimerosal is. They'll read all the ingredients,
yes,
right? And they'll see thimerosal. They don't have a clue as the fact that it's mercury, right? It's the nasal spray that the long-lasting nasal spray. It's right there. I mean, believable.
Okay, I'm just taking a look at it. Let's see. Apparently, they're saying that they took the thimerosal out back in 2005. But it could be, it's listed as a non-medical ingredient. But for those who are not familiar with what we're talking about, thimerosal is a mercury-based preservative, but mercury is a neurotoxin, and it does cause damage. And one of the reasons why there's such a concern with so many vaccines still having it is because each individual vaccine, they'll say, well, there's hardly any thimerosal in there. But when you look at the huge number of vaccines that are being mandated for children, something like above 50 now, cumulatively, that's a lot of mercury being pumped into these kids. And then you wonder why their brains start malfunctioning.
Well, my grandson is autistic or was autistic. We kind of took care of that by doing all kinds of things, including I bought a hyperbaric chamber and all kinds of things. So I'm very much aware of the damage it can do. I mean, I remember when my grandson was 20 months old and being told at the Montreal Children's Hospital that he was severely autistic. And I said, well, what can we do? And he says, well, get ready to put him in an institution eventually, So there I'm looking at my 20-month-old son playing on the ground there and in the hospital with the psychiatrist telling me that eventually he'll be institutionalized. Well, that didn't happen because he's doing very, very well now, and it cost me a lot of money and a lot of chelation and a lot of other things. But,
got to get that mercury out somehow. The body doesn't have a natural system for getting rid of it, and that's why chelation therapy can really help.
Well, there are things that we did that. First thing I did was find a doctor who had a child who was also autistic. That helped.
That might be a good thing as well. But we're starting to see an alarming trend by the American Medical Association to literally threaten doctors with loss of their medical license if they don't conform to the official propaganda.
I know. You got to keep the name out of the news there because then they're worried about losing their medical license.
Well, there was this problem that surfaced with the oral polio vaccine, which was an attenuated pathogen vaccine, and the pathogen returned to full potency after application, and kids started coming down with what looked like polio, and the AMA literally went on out and said, you will not use the word polio, you will use some other euphemism because we're officially saying it can't be polio if they had the polio vaccine. And, again, it is a huge, huge problem. How old is your son now, Phil?
Well, it's my grandson. He's going to be 12 soon. He's finishing elementary school. He's doing very well.
Excellent. I'm so glad you were able to bring him back.
Yeah, well, it cost me, I bought a hyperbaric chamber. That cost me $21,000. We put him on injections of methyl B12, and there was all kinds of things that they got him off of gluten. Basically, the vaccine just destroyed his gut, and we were able to. He still is has to be gluten free, but he can eat everything else. So I mean.
Well, that's good here. I mean, the FDA is out there just trying to lock away all this stuff. Apparently, they've just banned intravenous injections of vitamin C, which is known to do a lot of really good
vitamin
things.
C helps.
Yeah.
But the methyl B12 makes it. And then, because what happens is there's, what's it called, that is generated in the brain to remove all the garbage truck for the chemicals in the brain. The methyl, what happens, one of the, when, how should I put this? When the enzymes and the proteins are being produced, it does it in different stages. So if there's a break in one of the different components as the body's building the compounds.
I hate to cut you off here. I do know that there's an issue with the age at which the myelin sheaths of the neurons finish growing, because the brain isn't fully formed at birth, and apparently when these vaccines are administered before the myelin sheaths complete, the possibility of autism is much higher.
He didn't talk till almost 5 years old, but now he's fluent.
Well, I'm glad for that. Phil, I'm going to have to let you go. Good luck.
Right.
Good news about your grandson coming back and everything. And we're going to switch over to Tim in Wyoming. Aloha, Tim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Thanks for taking my call. I wanted to talk to you about the GMO labeling, because when you had Don Wiskin on earlier, that was one thing that I thought that he would have probably mentioned, was that GMO prevalence was one of the things that was causing issues with people's health. And what I've noticed here in Wyoming recently is that there are quite a few things that are now labeled, even corn chips and potato chips and cereals. There's a cereal company that I used to have a great liking for the cereal company, and I won't say who it is, but they've been bought by another company, and now they produce almost everything with genetic engineering, and it's labeled on their bag, on their packages. Okay, so now that I've said bag, you probably can guess who it is, but it doesn't really matter. I mean, the fact is that it seems as though Wyoming is becoming either a dumping ground for GMO labeled products, or they're just now beginning to label the things out so people understand that maybe they decide they don't want to eat that stuff anymore. It may be a better idea not to eat it.
Well, I think you're very lucky to live in a state where they have GMO labeling like they have in Vermont, but as you know, there's a big push by the GMO companies in Congress to ban GMO labeling all across the nation and basically overturn these state laws. There are projects out there like the GMO Project that are constantly testing products and produce, trying to give you a list of what has GMO and what does not, but they're just approving these products left and right. They've just approved a GMO pink pineapple, and they didn't even do any safety testing on it. They simply relied on the word of the company that holds the patent for the pink pineapple that is perfectly safe, and it's going to be in the stores soon. I'm certainly not going to buy one. They've approved a GMO apple that resists browning, and the problem with all of these products is not the altered DNA itself, but the protein expression, because what happens, we've already seen in some of these GMO products, like Roundup Ready corn, where the corn is able to resist the pesticide, but it had an unanticipated side effect. The stalks of the corn are much stronger than the natural variety, and the farmers who are using the GMO corn literally have to buy Kevlar belted tires for their tractors in order to resist puncture. And these companies that are putting out these GMO products aren't looking to find these unintended side effects. There's no way to predict them. And it comes about because what the DNA does is it sends out the instructions on how to form proteins. These instructions are carried by what's called messenger RNA to the portions of the cell that are actually the little factories for manufacturing the proteins. But if the instructions have been altered, it's manufacturing proteins that are just slightly different than the natural version. And so when your body tries to make use of those proteins, they'll fit into the receptors kind of, sort of, but not exactly. And it's from this that I think we're starting to see a lot of people getting symptoms from these GMO products. I'm still not satisfied that the Morgellons syndrome wasn't tied into an early GM mistake, because analysis of those strands that were growing out of those poor people showed plant DNA, and these Morgellons diseases were all happening in areas where early GMO test fields were being grown.
Are you talking? You're talking about the thing that I've heard it called skin tags in some cases, but are you talking about actual? You're talking about something like a vine or a fiber growing out of someone's skin.
Well, they're very, very fine fiber. They're very, very fine. They're almost like hairs, like fine hairs, but they're also very itchy and very uncomfortable. And they call it Morgellons disease, and the official line is it's all in their heads. They're just imagining it. There's no such thing. And we've heard that before.
Oh, sure, yeah.
We heard that with Gulf War syndrome.
You're not really seeing what's on your skin, of course, right? Yeah. Now I'm wondering now, because I know that what farmers used to do way back when, of course, when there was no such thing as GMO, they used to actually feed their cows the stalks, the corn stalks, because it's grass fiber. But now, what are they going to have to do next if they want to get rid of those corn stalks that are Roundup ready? Are they going to have to genetically modify some cows with razor-sharp teeth or something so they can eat them now? Or
maybe, or they'll just sell the corn stalks to the ethanol production companies.
Or they could use them as spike strips for the police, maybe. Or something.
Good. Possibly.
Okay.
All right, Tim, we're going to let you go. Thank you very much for the phone call here. Now, we were talking before about how the shooter at that shopping mall, the Portland anti-Trump protest leader was a registered sex offender. And in his case, it's certainly justified. But apparently over in Oakland, California, they had a recent update to their courtroom management software. It was last year. And all of a sudden they're discovering that the bug in this updated software is incorrectly registering people as sex offenders. People who are totally innocent of that kind of crime are just being labeled. Don't they test this stuff before they send it out? It really is rather ridiculous. You know something? Computers have almost become a religious icon. Oh, it's a computer. It must be right. No, it isn't. It's only as good as its software going into it. Garbage in, garbage out. You know, to err is human. To really mess things up takes a computer. And there have been some horrendous disasters caused by over-dependence and overconfidence in these computer systems. All right, we're going to take a phone call from Stephen in Oregon. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Hey, I've been very confused a little bit about, well, first I wanted to say it's funny when I see the protests and all these things going on and different things on the Internet. It seems like it came to me 5 minutes ago. It seems like a man and a wife fighting over what's for dinner when the wife has the credit cards, up to $60,000 the husband doesn't know, and the husband's out with prostitutes with no protection, and they're fighting over what's for dinner. But we'll go on from that.
Okay.
Because I think things are a lot deeper. And then sorry if that was too deep. But anyways, what I look at is I've always thought that presidents were selected, not elected. So then Trump gets in, and it seemed to change that. So it got kind of confusing to me. And I'm going, did he really win? Because I think that the people above him are more powerful than to allow that. So
let me address that issue. Okay, the presidents are selected through the system of election fraud in order to maintain the illusion that we still have a democratically elected leadership. And election fraud has been a major problem in this country for a long, long time. Elections do get stolen. But the one thing you need to remember is election fraud can shift a result by a few percentage points. It cannot reverse a landslide, because if you have a landslide for candidate A and candidate B is declared the winner, it's only going to take a few days of people talking with each other about, did you really vote for this person, for everybody to suddenly realize that something very strange is going on. And we're now finding out that at this point, the estimate is there were 25 million crooked votes, either dead people voting, illegal immigrants voting, multiple voting, rigged registrations, 25 million questionable votes for Hillary Clinton. So she most assuredly did not win the popular vote. And it appears that the reality is Donald Trump won by such a landslide that somebody decided it was too risky to try and declare Hillary Clinton the winner. And at that point, things really began to come apart, and Jill Stein comes along, and her recount exposes even more election fraud in favor of Hillary Clinton. And so they basically had to go with the will of the people, just like what happened with Brexit. There was massive fraud going on the part of the Remain campaign, but they couldn't reverse a landslide. And that is really what's important to keep in mind. So Donald Trump certainly seems to be the real deal. He's definitely the outsider. The one percenters do not like him. The corporate media does not like him. The liberal establishment doesn't like him. And even a big part of the GOP establishment still does not like him. But he's out there showing everybody who's boss. And he's basically laying down the law. And it looks like more and more of the bureaucracy is going to start getting in line behind him rather than risk a repeat from The Apprentice and getting fired.
So basically, I have been saying to everybody who talks, I think everybody agrees with me, give it 3 or 4 months first before you talk.
Well, we have to do that, but the other problem is that I don't think Trump is going to be able to stop the coming economic crash, and of course when it happens, everybody's going to blame it on him, just like they did Herbert Hoover in the 1930s. Anyway, Steve, we're going to let you go here. Thank you very much. And we're going to close the phone lines here because we're down to our last segment of our program. Apparently, over in Flint, Michigan, the Flint citizens have filed a lawsuit against the EPA for $722 million in damages for the failure to handle last year's water crisis. And it only underscores that a lot of these government agencies will sit there and pretend that they're working for the people. They'll watch porn on their taxpayer-funded computers and not really do anything. That is something I think we can guarantee Donald Trump is going to bring to an end. You're either doing your job that you're supposed to do or you're going to be out of here. He's a businessman. He's not going to put up with this nonsense. We'll be right back. Hello, America. Welcome back to the last segment of our program today here, and I'm already getting emails about that call from the grandfather who was able to pull his grandson back from the autism, and it is possible to do. It is hideously expensive, and that is probably a reason why the vaccine companies are trying to keep a lid on the fact that their vaccines have caused the autism, because the civil lawsuits would bankrupt them to pay that much money per autism victim. Somebody else wrote on in to say that the dangers of simply blindly trusting that computers are always going to be perfect and never make a mistake are illustrated by this movie that came out back in 1995 called The Net with Sandra Bullock, which is one of my favorite movies because of the issues that it raises. And let's not forget HAL 9000 in 2001, The Space Odyssey, or Colossus, The Foreman Project, or Skynet. Anyway, let's see. Last week we reported on a story where physicists claimed that they'd succeeded in making a metallic form of hydrogen. Now, it's long been theorized that under sufficient pressure, hydrogen would turn into a metallic state. Now, unfortunately, experts are casting doubts on the claim because apparently what they are claiming is the metallic hydrogen is embedded into the diamonds of the diamond anvil that was used to create it, and they're saying they can't let it out or it turns back into hydrogen gas. And so there's no real way to actually confirm their discovery. And I think this is another illustration of why the science is never really settled about anything else. Now, over in Cornwall, England, they have a serious air pollution problem. And their solution is not to try and control the pollution, but to literally evacuate these people. Allow the councils to take the homes of dozens of families in these pollution hotspots and just move them someplace else. That's not really a solution. Not at all. Okay, now then, I already talked about that here. Apparently Florida is now starting to flip on back towards Second Amendment. Apparently there are a bunch of pro-gun bills scheduled for the Florida legislature, including open carry and possibly campus carry. Now, last week there was a video that came on out where some of these anti-Trump protesters were trying to set fire to an American flag. And this FedEx driver apparently was very angry about this, got out of his truck, walked up and rescued the flag, put it out with a fire extinguisher, endured quite a bit of abuse. The pro-Trump protesters apparently complained to FedEx trying to get this guy fired, and FedEx said, "We have absolutely no problem with any of our people protecting the American flag." Now, I understand that the First Amendment says it's okay to burn the flag as a form of protest, but I think it's also First Amendment protection that you can save that flag. And at this point, everybody who's out there burning a flag to protest the president is basically declaring that they don't want to be part of America anymore. So here's a solution. We send all the anti-Americans over to Syria, and we'll keep the refugees. Problem solved. There's the music. Time for me to get out of here. We'll be back tomorrow, Thursday, here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, stay informed, stay skeptical, make good choices, share what you know with everybody that you know. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.